You have like the inklings of an idea and you want to have a book and you need to know where to go from there.
Have no magic. You are a slave.
I had this idea of a fairy mall.
Contrary to what some of you people may believe, including Alina, your make-believe Hogwarts house doesn't have any bearing on real life.
And I remember every time I ran by it, I was just like, there is for sure a portal to some fantasy realm in the backyard.
And the most beautiful part of that movie to Alina is when the mom rolls out the life plan for her daughter, and she has her daughter's entire life planned down to 10-minute increments.
I probably wasted like 2 years of my life doing that.
I'm going to translate what she just said in English.
I started writing, I got 10 chapters in, and I realized it was crap. Like what I was writing was just crap. And I remember crying. I remember writing, I can remember this sentence in particular. Donovan yeets them boys.
And action.
Nah.
Also, the camera's going to die, or...
I don't think so. It said full battery. I'll start. Hey guys, so this is the second time we're filming this because the first time the audio didn't record at all for whatever reason, because I don't know what I'm doing, I guess. So we're starting this again. We're going to do like a 3-part series that's basically going from idea to like outlining the book. That's what we're going to talk about right now. The next video will be writing, editing beta readers, and the video after that will be querying, and then going from that to indie publishing, formatting, cover artists, printing, all of that jazz, and just what we've experienced going through that in like last end of like 2024 into 2025, and where the industry's at and our experience with all of that. And yeah.
So for all the non-authors out there, I'm going to translate what she just said in English because I didn't know what 80% of those terms meant before I got involved in all this. So basically, we're going to give you an origin story of the book, where the idea came from, and how it matured into what it is now, and the writing process, and kind of what we went through. And then once we finished it, you know, the stuff we went through and did to try and get it published. That's in English how you would.
Yeah, I feel like this series is for people who want to have a book. You have like the inklings of an idea and you want to have a book and you need to know where to go from there.
Or you're just curious because you like us and you like our book.
And we're awesome.
And you're thinking, hey, I want to listen to some podcast and I'm curious about these guys. And, you know, Alina's funny and Sam's handsome, so I might as well.
Okay.
Just put that out there.
Hopefully that works. Okay, so I guess for now, let's just jump into the idea portion of this, which is mostly my portion of this.
So in case you didn't know, the story is, it's the idea is Alina's, really, the creative underpinnings of the story. And so take it away. Where did it come from?
Where did my idea come from? Okay, so this goes back to my teenage years, basically. In high school, I wrote tons of ideas down for books, just things that came to my head daydreaming, things that actually came to my head in dreams, just anything that popped up. And this particular one, I used to live in Henderson, but I lived across the street from Las Vegas. And I remember at the age of, I was probably like 14 years old, and I would go running. And I don't know how my parents let me go running on my own this distance, like in this area. Not that it was like a dangerous area, but it was Las Vegas. So, you know, not the safest. And I would go on this run and get to a certain house that was like kind of in this back neighborhood, but it was like where some custom homes were built. And this particular house had like tons of overgrowth, and there were like statues of like fairies or like goddess creatures, and then like frogs, and it just looked super whimsical. And I remember every time I ran by it, I was just like, there is for sure a portal to some fantasy realm in the backyard of that house. And I knew it. And so that was like the start of that was like I probably wrote that down somewhere where it was like there's this fantasy fairy realm that you can get to in this backyard of this house. And my main character is gonna find it somehow. Um, and then it kind of got added to other ideas. So the other idea that I had at the time, so I was a teenager, I was babysitting a lot, and basically any little girls that I babysat were watching the Tinkerbell movies at the time. The, like, Disney Tinkerbell
Classics.
Iridessa, you know?
Eurydice, you actually know
That's
what
one yeah. Well, I have kids now, and we've watched them again.
in years.
Fawn, I don't remember all of them, but they all have their names, but the point being was I had, like, in my head, I was like, "Okay, there are all of these fairies, and they have different abilities based on, like, if they're a flower fairy or a water fairy or whatever," and I thought, "Okay, well, what if it was seasons and you had, like, spring fairies that could do certain things because they were born in spring?" And, just for all of the seasons. So that was the other idea that I had. And then I don't remember if this was a dream that I had had or I was just daydreaming or I was just a teenager, but I had this idea of a fairy mall. And okay, if you had like spring fairies, it sounds so dumb now. It's fine. If you had spring fairies and summer fairies and autumn fairies and winter fairies, and they all have their different abilities, then they're going to need to go buy different things that they have to use for their abilities. And so this mall would be broken up into these different sections, and it would kind of look like a flower, like the petals of a flower around this mall. But then you have this like center section that would either be like an upstairs or like right in the middle, and what would be there? And I had this idea that there were imps that were born on the 13th of every month or Friday the 13th or something, and they were just unlucky fairies that had no abilities, and basically their stuff was like cleaning supplies because that's all they were
You
good
have no
for.
magic. You're a slave.
Pretty much. Yeah. That was basically where
What's your
that
birthday?
idea popped in.
Blankety blank the 13th. Ooh,
Sucks for
rough.
you. Yeah,
Janitor for life.
pretty much. So, and I think part of it was like I was trying to think of things in our world where it's like, okay, Friday the 13th, why is that an unlucky day? Or why does everybody have a problem with that? Well, because that's where imps came from, obviously. And that, like, we forgot about that, but that's why we believe that now. It's like ingrained in us.
Should have known.
Right. Should've. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Anyway, so that's basically where the ideas came from. And they were bad. So then I got around to writing the book.
Well, to be fair, they weren't bad. They were just,
They were just
you
young,
know,
you know?
unfleshed out.
Yeah, they
That's
were a
not
start.
a thing, but anyway.
They were very girly, very teenage girly, maybe even younger in some respects. But yeah, that was kind of where my ideas came from. And so then when I decided I wanted to write a book, I had seen a lot of videos that said, don't start with your best ideas. And this was not one of my best ideas at the time.
So you thought.
So I thought, yeah, it wasn't one of my best ideas.
I don't know that that was great advice.
This
You know,
advice
to
that I'm
start
talking
with
about.
with the idea that you don't like.
Yeah.
Because it could be so easy. We'll get into this when we talk about writing the book, but it's like if you don't like the story, it can be such a slog to get through it. Because
Yes.
writing a story you like is hard enough as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't like something, if you don't like it, it's gonna be really hard to write. And even if your first draft of something isn't great, that doesn't mean you can't refine it and make it good. So I don't know, maybe there's some value to that to not start with your favorite story, but I would almost say the opposite. Start with what you like
Yeah.
and get it out there. And then that doesn't necessarily mean you have to try to get your first draft published, but
But I think writing, especially from the beginning when you haven't finished a fiction novel. So I had written 2 nonfiction novels by this point. They were 50,000 words each, and they're gone. I have taken them off the internet. Nobody will ever read them again. But I had written those because I was like, okay, I need to prove myself that I can at least finish a book. That was my goal. And when I finished the first one, I thought maybe it was a fluke, so I did another one. And by the time I got done with that one, I was like, okay, I need to like actually try to write some fiction because I have all of these story ideas and I've started multiple stories, 3 chapters here, 2 chapters there of different stories that I had ideas for. And so when I finally got to this one, I had heard those ideas of start with not your best idea. And so I picked this one because if it didn't work out, I wouldn't be butthurt over it because it wasn't the best idea I had. Um, and so then that kind of went into the brainstorming thing. And honestly, I don't remember much about brainstorming.
You don't remember much about brainstorming?
Okay, well, I remember brainstorming when it came to you, like when you started the process with me. But when I had
When I
written,
started, you already had 7 billion slides full of.
okay, well,
We're not going to talk about that.
we will talk about that. But that's a little bit different because brainstorming for me, okay, so yeah, let's talk about that first, actually. So when I got into this, I always loved like the world of Harry Potter, where it's like you have the Harry Potter
Also,
books.
let me just say,
Go ahead.
for those that don't know Alina personally,
I'm
Alina's
a
a plan
Ravenclaw.
fiend.
I'm sorry,
You're a what?
a Ravenclaw.
No. Has nothing to do with real life. Just so that we're clear.
Okay, go
Contrary to what some of you people may believe, including Alina, your
well,
make-believe Hogwarts house doesn't have any bearing on real life.
oh, okay.
Anyway,
So
sorry to shatter dreams. But
go
anyway,
back to what
no,
you're
I'm
saying.
talking about the fact that you're a planning fiend
Yeah, I
and that
am.
you find more pleasure and joy in planning things than actually doing them
Yeah, duh.
and in just planning generally. I
Planning's
think the last
fun.
time we recorded this, I had said to all the perfect comparison is for those who have seen The Little Prince,
Yeah.
Alina's the mom. And the most
You know
beautiful
what?
part of that whole
She's got
movie,
her life in order.
she's the bad guy, just so we're clear. And the most beautiful part of that movie to Alina is when the mom rolls out the life plan for her daughter, and she has her daughter's entire life planned down to 10-minute increments
Look.
for like her whole life.
It's so satisfying.
Yeah, I rest my case. Anyway, that's gonna
Yeah.
set the stage for what
Yeah.
what we're gonna get into.
So, in proper me fashion, I had this idea and I was like, okay, if I'm going to go anywhere with this idea, I really have to know what this world is about. Like, I have to have everything in order and planned.
Yeah, okay. So let's just be clear because the way you're explaining it, it makes it sound like I need to have a, basic knowledge of okay. No, I need to have a full chronology of the world history
I do
down
have
to
that.
dates, major dates and happenings,
Yeah.
a calendar,
Yep.
a encyclopedia's worth of animals and plants,
Yeah. My
festivals,
compendium.
your compendium, festivals, religious holidays, and other cultural observances,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth, to the tune of how many slides do you have?
568 or something. 568 slides.
I rest my case. So
It was important.
more information was important. More information than could ever be processed.
Look.
It was useful in many instances. I'm not gonna lie,
no, it was.
but it was also it led to
I wasted a lot of
very
time.
dense first draft.
It did. Well, yeah. So here's the problem that I think I ran into is, like I was saying before, I am like a Harry Potter nerd. I like Harry Potter, and I don't like it necessarily as a narrative. Well,
You
I
like
did.
the world.
Yeah, I like the
Here's
world. I
the
like
thing.
that there's a
Here's the
lot of
thing.
things in
You
it.
like the world. You did like the story, but the story led you to like the world, which is, I think,
Yeah.
what's happened to a lot of Harry Potter fans and why Harry Potter merch and stuff is so popular.
Yeah.
But you wanted your book to be both Harry Potter, the story,
Mhm.
and is it Fantastic
I'm
Beasts
too
and Where to Find
tired.
Them is actually is
Yeah.
just about all the different creatures?
Yeah, that's like the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Fantastic
wanted
Beasts and Where
you
to Find
wanted
Them.
this book to be both of those things at the same time,
Yeah. For sure.
which is not possible.
Yeah. Like, to add to that too, like, part of my world building that I had done, the slides that I did, I included, like, their schooling and every class that everybody would have had to take, including, like, each course.
Yeah. I don't remember how much of that is in the book, but
Not
some has been
much.
cut out, but there's like textbook titles.
There are textbook title because they exist in my head. I have them. I
Yeah.
know
So
what they are.
anyway, what
And so but this is
so
the
there was
problem
a
that I ran
lot of
into.
stuff. There was way too much.
Yeah. That was the problem that I ran into when I was writing was because I had organized so much in my head, like just created this huge vast world, which is cool. And there was a lot to work with, but I probably wasted 2 years of my life doing that. Hmm. Yeah. Sorry. I think I'm gonna be sick. Yeah, I probably wasted like 2 years of my life doing that when I could have just been writing the outline. And I don't know, like writing the outline, writing the book, whatever. And I don't know if it would have been worse if I had just jumped right in because I had like years to stew over what was going to happen in this story. Um, and I think it's turned out good.
Yeah, I don't know that it was so much a problem with whether or not, doing that was excessive or not. Because it turned out to be useful. I think what the real issue is that your first draft just had way too much of that stuff. Like,
And it still probably has too much.
I don't know about that. I mean,
Not too
maybe.
much, but it
Buy
still
the
has a
book and
lot.
you tell us. Oh, but I think the real
Good.
issue was that in your first draft, you just included way too much of that stuff. And
Because I was so excited about it.
yeah, because you thought it was cool and you were excited about it, but it didn't matter to the story.
Yeah. And you had to do too much explanation for each of the
Right.
things that
And that was what, when
didn't
I
work.
started looking at it, that was kind of one of the big things as I was going through. It was like, why are we talking about this? Why is there all this exposition? Why is it?
And this was
Yeah.
also kind of around the time where I had started watching some of Brandon Sanderson's online courses, and one of the things that he talks about is like that readers seem to think that authors have like it's like the iceberg where it's like all this ice up on top and then there's like tons below the surface that you can see that's like there but like it's submerged so not the readers can't see it. So they see everything on top but the author knows all of this stuff down beneath. And he explained that like really what it is the authors can see down here and then it's like hollow on the inside. But they like there's enough to like give the illusion that the author knows way more than what is actually there. And they're just kind of figuring it out as they go along.
I mean, I think that depends. I think that's probably true.
It's probably true in a lot of cases,
That's
but not all.
probably true specifically in fiction and more so in like fantasy and
Yeah.
sci-fi, right? Because if you're creating a bunch of new rules for the world and stuff of that nature,
Yeah.
that kind of has to be the case, right? Because otherwise you would spend,
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
think about how many books we have just explaining how our world works.
right.
You could not do that for
Fair enough, but I think there are definitely
I mean,
other
you can
cases
have
where that might
more
not
or
necessarily be
less
the case, but
information just in the behind the scenes
right.
world that you have. and I have a lot, but I will say I've gone back to that file since we've, like, finished the first book and read some of the slides where it talks about, like, just cultural things that people do, and I'm like, "That never made it in the book." And it never will, like, it probably doesn't even exist anymore because it's like
Yeah, and
how they
I
would
mean,
do a handshake or something,
things
and, like,
changed
it just
too, yeah.
disappeared from my draft, and so now I'm like, well, I mean, if that was going to be a thing, it should have at least been done once in the book so that
Right.
people knew about it. Otherwise, it's just like you introduce it later and it makes no sense. So, as useful as that file has been for me in a lot of instances, there's a lot of stuff that didn't make it. And so I probably just overplanned.
Yeah, but also you had fun doing it, so, yeah, there's that.
I did. And I made a new language. And so I have a whole file based on the new language and everything else.
Now there's a real point where, you know, Hollow Iceberg, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
it's, like, sorta kinda a new language. It's not like, Tolkien full-blown new syntax rules and
Nobody can do that.
whatever, so,
Nobody.
yeah.
Except, I've seen stuff on, like, Game of Thrones, but it wasn't until that became a show where they hired, like, a linguist that
Yeah.
went in and really did the details on it, which is, like, that would be my dream. That would be the coolest thing ever to have somebody go in and create
That's
a
one
whole new
opinion.
language. Yeah, do it. Well, it'll be cool. Anyway, but yeah, that got us really into, like, the brainstorming between the 2 of us because I started writing, I got 10 chapters in, and I realized it was crap. Like, what I was writing was just crap. I was not happy with it. I hated my main character.
I think that was the main issue. I don't know that you necessarily hated the story, but you definitely didn't like the main character.
Yeah,
And then when I read
despised
it,
her.
well, there and yeah, and there for good reason because I read it and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like,
She's
is she gonna
awful.
die?
Can
Can we
she
get rid of
die
this
off and
person?"
we can go with somebody else?
And it's
Yeah.
because she was very teenager when you first wrote her. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, well, now we've had one complaint in one of our reviews, more
But that
recent
she's too
reviews, that it's
young.
too young, you know?
Yeah. And it does make me wonder because it's a clean fantasy.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, is it too young because you're used to reading stuff that maybe there's cuss words or more,
Yeah, I don't know.
intimate things
Anyway,
going
the
on,
point was
but
just that originally she was very, like, angsty teenager. I mean, that's why she was unlikable is because she was actually not a
Mhm.
pleasant person.
And I'm the kind of person that read angsty teenagers in books and hated those
It
books.
was
So when I
so bad.
started writing that and I was hating the
Like, she was
character,
loathsome. I mean,
oh, it was so bad.
I don't know. Maybe that's just a byproduct of how a lot of characters are written now.
Yeah, I
Because
don't
like, the
know.
character I don't know. I
I
haven't
don't know.
read these
Maybe
books.
I was just really angsty.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I'm only going based off I mean, I am going based off movies because I haven't read, like, The Hunger Games and, like, Divergent, but we watched that movie.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's like where the main girl character is, like, she's supposed to be, like, not this super angsty, but also, like, she's this I don't wanna say overly fiery, but that's kinda how it comes across, like, overly
Uh,
headstrong female lead that's young and, like
mhm.
and it just comes across as, like, I know more than everyone, and I'm brash, and, like, everyone else is a moron, and so I
Yeah.
don't like them, or I just or I anyway, you get the idea.
Well, and the
So
problem is that I had set up the main character in that situation from the beginning, and I had done it unwittingly because I wanted her to have to leave her home to go somewhere else. And I wanted it to be kind of easy for her, like, she was excited for her new adventure.
mhm.
And so her parents are, I mean, awful.
I mean,
They
yeah, her
were
mom was
awful.
fine, she was just weak. Her mom was weak and lame,
Yeah,
and her dad was a drunk and a loser, and
yeah.
so it was like, she
So she goes to leave and
realistically,
she's
she could
like,
only be angry, I mean, she was kinda
yeah,
had this crappy home like, her whole life sucked, and so it was like she was
happy to be
angsty and happy
gone.
to leave, but also like so unlikable.
Yeah, crazy and that's my fault.
And so we talked about that a lot. I don't even remember the detail. I don't know if you remember maybe some of the details of
I
those
just remember us
conversations. I don't
talking about
really,
it and
but
it being like, what if her parents weren't so awful? Like, what if she was really sad to leave her home and she was actually a really happy person and she was
well, because
just
that's what
doing
you
her
wanted. Like
best?
when we
Yeah.
talked about it, that's what
Mhm.
you wanted her to be. You
Yeah.
wanted her to be this very positive person who was, you know, um, somewhat reserved, but willing and positive, So it's
Yeah.
like when helpful and where possible and things like that. So
Mhm.
when we were looking at the first draft and it's like, well, you know, she's not like that at all. So yeah, so we ended up making a lot of changes to her character, which was very helpful, I think. That was kind of the outset, the brainstorming, but I mean, we're basically at the end of the brainstorming with the
Brainstorming
writing.
wise, really, we sat down and had so many conversations. It
Yeah,
was
I guess
just
it depends what you mean
talking
by
and talking and
brainstorming. I guess we
talking.
can talk about how the writing process went
We
with
can go
us
more into that
because,
in the next one. But
well, I'm just going to say because
yeah,
it depends what you mean by brainstorming. Because what happened is you ended up writing, so you wrote those first 10 chapters and then we talked about it and then made some changes, but you ended up writing the whole thing. You finished the first draft before I touched it, right?
I think so.
So you finished the whole thing and then I went back through and read it and then drafted a second version. So
Mhm.
kind of as we got through it, and we did most of our talking, I feel like, as I was going through the second draft.
Yeah. I mean,
Because I
more
would,
changes happened through the second draft, but there were conversations that we had before you came in where it was like, okay, so I have kind of these things happening, but I know this is happening in book 4, so what do I have to do about that? And like, I didn't really know how the whole series was going to end. I didn't even know I wanted it to be a whole series until like a certain point where I was like, well, what if I just took all of the 4 main characters and like they all had really meaningful things to hash out over the course of like what's going on in this bigger plot. And then I was like, okay, well, yeah, that would kind of make like 4 books. And like there was enough information for 4 books. And I remember us sitting down and trying to talk through like, what is the end of this going to look like? Like, what's the point? What's the like big finale? And I remember us having that conversation. I remember where I was sitting. We were in our like duplex on, a main road and you could hear the cars outside. And I may have been
how
pregnant
do
at the
you
time.
remember this?
Because I remember us sitting and talking about it and you going, well, yeah, like this is how it has to end. And like me realizing like, oh yeah, that is how it has to end. And I remember crying, like sitting on the couch and crying. It was like a Sunday or something. And we were home from church talking about it. And I was like crying because I realized, oh my gosh, I have to do that to my characters. And I love these characters. Like I did at that point. But like that was just a matter of we had to talk about it and like realize where this major plot had to go so that everything made sense.
Had you not finished the first draft by the time we
I was
figured all
probably
that out?
close around that time. That would have been when you
Yeah.
kind of
So
jumped
I
in
don't
and
know. I
started
feel
doing
like
it.
we did a lot of our brainstorming as the thing was being written.
Yeah.
And then that ended up, you know, with draft 2, there were a lot of changes and we went from about 80,000 words, I think, to like 140. Or
Yeah.
did we go to 120? Maybe we went to less. Maybe we went to like 120
I think we went to
on
120 and
draft
then we
2
sent
and
it to
then
beta readers
ended up
and they
going to,
wanted more. So,
I don't remember. Anyway, but yeah, so it added a lot. I mean, to be fair,
to be fair,
you left me some chunks in that first draft that
I mean,
that
yes.
were like
Hold on. I definitely have notes on this that I was
XYD
like, we need to.
XYZ does this. And that was like, it was like
I remember
not minor stuff. Like, please write full battle sequence here. Please do like
I remember writing, I can remember this sentence in particular. Donovan yeets them boys. just leaving it for you to figure out because my brain was not gonna figure out that battle scene that day. I remember you coming to that point in the first draft and just being like, "What the hell?"
Well, yeah. So anyway,
Mm.
needless to say, there was some changes. But I guess to the point that you were trying to get to earlier, which is the mall, it is no longer referenced in book 1.
It won't
And
be
it
ever
probably will
again.
not be
And I
referenced.
was very sad about it because my
You were
heart
all
was in that
mad.
mall.
This was the origin
I
of
mean,
this whole
really
story.
think about it. Well, yeah, I had 3 origins. Okay, first of all, let's talk about those 3 origins to the story. It was the house in Vegas that there was going to be a portal to this world from.
Yeah, but that's kind of...
This is not a portal fantasy.
Yeah, that's true. But I thought that the house... I thought that the palace was kind of sort of based on that house.
No.
Really?
There's like nothing. Literally, I have this old chapter, like first chapter of this book, that was like this girl in high school ends up at this portal in this backyard. That's what this was supposed to be.
It's
And
like
at
the
some
Chronicles
point,
of Narnia, but not.
well, pretty
for
much.
copyright infringement reasons.
There's tons of portal fantasy. It's not just that. But yeah, it was supposed to be a portal fantasy from this backyard of this house that I had grown up running.
Anyway,
near.
that got axed.
So that was axed because it's not a portal fantasy. This is just another. There's a map. It has nothing to do with our world at all. Our world doesn't exist. And then the Tinkerbell thing, that's kind of there. That's like for sure still there.
You still have that.
Yeah, that's like.
I mean, it's not Tinkerbell at all, but
no,
there's
no fairies.
There's a division of magics that
based on seasons, and that's like the extent of that, which is kind of what I wanted. And then the fairy mall, gone. So like only one of the...
to be fair, the mall is like that hidden iceberg that's there. It's just not...
It's there, but you ain't never gonna see it.
It's only there in your head.
Yeah. You'll maybe... And
or for those lucky few readers who have watched this podcast, they will know that the mall somewhere in the city.
Although how I've described it and how it came out in the book are like 2 different things as well. So
that's
it's like,
also... Yes, that's true.
Yeah, so it's not quite the same, but it does exist, and it is, down beneath the water in that iceberg. And maybe someday we'll be able to write stories in the world that are not this story.
For Dalian shopping.
Yeah.
A compendium.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, it's totally
The
possible.
mall. A pop-up book.
That would be so cool. What a great idea. I love that. I'm telling you, it'd be great. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to go more into like the writing and the editing and the beta readers in our next video, which we're talking about right now, but we're just going to cut this so that you can move on to the next video when you're ready. So meet us over there and we'll do that then. Okay.
Great, let's talk about that. So,